Thank you, Eric. So, bonjour. Before getting started, imagine this. A single threat actor targeting both government officials and unsuspecting university students with tools you can download for free. So that's not fiction. It's exactly what SideCopy APT is doing today. It doesn't just go after your systems, it infiltrates trust. So in the next few minutes, we are going to break down how this group has evolved its tactics with multi-platform attacks and what it means to every one of us. So a little about me, I'm Satvik, currently working as a senior security researcher at Securite Labs, Quick Heal back in India for the past 3 years. So I'm part of the APT team where we track such APT groups, their infrastructure, and delve into dark web and malware analysis. So today's agenda is going to be, I'll introduce you like what or who is this SideCopy APT, what are its previous clusters that we have seen over the past few years, and then why they have transitioned from using HTA-based stages to MSI-based stages, look at its new targets and TTPs, what new sectors it has targeted, and then look at tons of correlation with its parent APT group known as APT36, and then finally end it with the response strategies. So SideCopy and its parent group, Transparent Tribe, or also known as APT36, are Pakistan-linked APT groups specifically targeting India. Transparent Tribe was active since almost 2013, targeting India and Afghanistan, specifically the sectors of government, defense, and slowly in 2022 it has started targeting the education sector with various Windows and Linux-based rats. And on the same lines, SideCopy, which was first observed by us in 2019, it was also targeting the same Indian and Afghanistan-related government entities with specific focus on Department of Military, Ministry of Defense entities. So it also has in-house custom tooling, but recently it has been started using a lot of open source tools. So firstly, in 2019, we observed TTPs related to Sidewinder APT, but the targeting was completely different. It was targeting the Afghanistan government with its well-known HTA-based stages and DLL side-loading techniques. But here the final payload that it was dropping is an open source agent known as Alacor Rat. So that is when we observed that this is exactly copying the TTPs of Sidewinder APT, and thus the name SideCopy was born in 2019. And then in 2020, it has started to target specifically the Indian defense sector with honey trap themes and the usual template injection vulnerabilities with the same HTA-based stager using Cactus Torch, which is again an open source builder for HTA. In 2021, we have seen it targeting the power sector with both targets as Indian and Afghanistan entities with in-house custom tooling known as Reverse Rat, Night Fury, and slowly we have seen it has expanded its arsenal with various plugins. In 2022, it has expanded to target Linux-based systems using unique Golang-based stealers and Python-based rats that are again open source. And here we have observed Kavach-themed lures which were used by its parent APT group APT36. In 2023, it has targeted the DRDO, which is comes under the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of External Affairs with missile-related lures, all the weapon systems that were being used by the Ministry of Defense with the next version of Reverse Rat payload, that is the 3.0. And here we have observed that the HTA-based stager was built by a new tool known as Silentfinity, which is again an open source similar to Cactus Torch that we have observed. In 2023, we have observed the first multi-platform clusters where it has weaponized, the very well-known WinRAR vulnerability 38831, and here it has started to target both Windows and Linux platforms simultaneously. So we are going to look at these multi-platform clusters that we have observed, and then in 2024, we'll look at how it has changed its TTPs, and even going into 2025, what are its new targets. So moving on to the first cluster. So first we have seen it is employing the usual tactics to using spear phishing email to drop the WinRAR archive file. So this is containing the benign decoy file, which once you click it will trigger the vulnerability and execute whatever payload is present inside that. And here it is the Alacor Rat, which is an open source remote access Trojan. So the decoy here you can see it is from an NGO, which is a letter to the Ministry of Defense confirming that it is again trying to lure the government officials and infiltrate these government systems. So, but this is not how we initially found it was exploiting this specific vulnerability. If you go to its previous TTPs, it is well known to use the HTA-based stages. So we first observed an archive file named as docscanner October hosted on a compromised domain. So this is containing a shortcut file, and this will trigger the MSHTA, which will run a remote HTA file present on this specific domain. So this HTA file contains an embedded DLL, and what essentially this HTA file does is it checks the .NET version, decodes all the base64 encoded strings, finally gets the what AV is installed, and then finally all these artifacts are sent to this embedded DLL, and where this DLL is run in the memory of the process, that is MSHTA process. And once this embedded DLL is triggered, this DLL will drop a remote access Trojan, which was observed for the first time, which we named after the PDB path, that is the DRAT, and it has the unique 13 commands, but with the typical remote access C2 commands that we have observed. But then we saw that this DRAT is connecting to the IP address on port 61101, and on this C2 we observed that allocore rat was also being used to communicate with the C2, and this is how we backtracked that how it was exploiting this vulnerability. But it was, on the same C2 with a different port. And another interesting thing that we observed is that in the same domain, another archive file is being hosted with the same name, docscanner, but it was having Linux-based payloads. And then we saw that it was again targeting the same Ministry of Defense with the ongoing events. So at that time, there was this medical delegation happening with the Saudi Arabia related to the Indian Ministry of Defense, and that is how we know that again, it is targeting this Ministry of Defense, and this was hosted on the same compromised domain. The domain was resolving to the ASN, which was frequently observed with the same SideCopy APT in its previous campaigns. So now if we go to the specific Linux-based stager, it is basically a simple Golang-based stager, which is setting the persistence for the final payload using the cron tab persistence, and then finally dropping the payload in the local share directory. So here it is dropping the decoy file, and then another open source Python-based rat, which is known as arisrat. So observe the specific sequences, so how it is setting up persistence, and then finally downloading into specific directory. So here we observed our first correlation with this Linux-based stager with APT36. So prior to this, the same sequence that you have observed was used by APT36, which was previously documented by researchers from Uptakes and Zscaler. So firstly, this stager was used to drop Poseidon-based agent, which is again an open source Mythic agent, very famous for its C2 framework. This was observed in March 2023 using PyInstaller-based payloads. And subsequently, in August, Zscaler also observed using desktop entries with the same, cron tab persistence, and then finally, the specific directory it is dropping the payloads. So this is the first correlation that we have observed, where again it is confirming the relation between SideCopy and APT36. So these are the Poseidon-based lures that were observed in 2024 from June to August, where these were hosted on this specific Google Drive email addresses. So the lures, if you see, these are related to the ongoing events like, filing the income tax returns, what are the cybersecurity advisories that were going on, or any audits that were being conducted at that time. This is the final payload, Linux-based arisrat, which is again an open source rat. And once we extracted this, we found that it is usually using its PyInstaller-based ELF binary. We extracted the config and the agent and found that the C2 is actually hosted behind a pfSense firewall. And if you observe that the naming convention with all these arisrat-based payloads starts with boss, so boss update, boss help, boss start, boss type. So what we observed is that BOSS is, a very recent operating system name developed by the government of India, so that it can be used, inside the network of the complete government officials. So they are trying to, even lure with the file names related to, this new operating system known as BOSS. So this was the decoy that we have observed targeting the Ministry of Defense. So all these decoys are, fake documents created by this APT group, and these are the 13 C2 commands typical, like download and execute payloads, upload, take screenshot, maintain persistence, and install or run whatever commands the attacker wants on the victim machine. So this is the overview of the first cluster, where it was targeting both Windows and Linux-based platforms, and at the same time exploiting this WinRAR vulnerability. And it was also observed that the pfSense was being used for hosting this aristrat, the C2 communication. So moving on to the clusters 2 and 3, these are almost same. I would say there is a little bit difference with the Windows-based payloads, whereas the Linux-based payloads are almost the same. In Windows, we can see that it is using the same naming convention. For both the archive files, the same naming convention is observed. But here, the compromised domains are different for both Windows and Linux. So previously, in the first cluster, we observed the same domain, and here we observed two different domains. On the right-hand side, you can see it is using the same ELF-based stager to drop the aristrat. But on the left-hand side, you can see the LNK is usually triggering the remote HTA, but this HTA is not dropping the DRAT that we have observed previously. So it is dropping two different RATs. One is a HTA-based RAT, and the second one is a DLL sideloading technique was used to load the action RAT. So the DLL sideloading was established with the persistence, which is named as action RAT, and this is based on Delphi, not Golang or the .NET that we usually see with this specific APT group. So this was sideloaded by the Windows Credential Wizard or the EFS Reiki Wizard, and then finally the action RAT is executed in the background. The HTA file that we observed is actually downloading and executing remote access Trojan known as FetaRAT. So this was not dropping this payload like DRAT that we have observed. This was running in the memory of MSHTA. And here we saw that after almost 30 minutes to 40 minutes, we observed that the action RAT was communicating with the C2, and it triggered a PowerShell command. And then the actual final payload was downloaded, which we named it as double action RAT, because it was downloaded via the same mechanism. The same DLL sideloading technique was used, but it was almost double the size of the final payload, which is duser.dll. So it was initially 221 KB, and the double action RAT is almost double, which is 437 KB, and its functionalities were also doubled. It was using file type enumeration to exfiltrate all sensitive documents present inside these government systems and exfiltrate. So initially, the action RAT was, you can understand like it's just a decoy, and then the final double action RAT payload is what it intended to drop on the final systems. So this is the cluster 3. Again, it is almost same. The right-hand side is targeting Linux-based systems with aristrat, but the Windows-based systems, you can see it is again using a different custom payload, which we named it as KRAT with the same payloads. These were the aristrat lures in 2024 that we observed. So it was targeting different kinds of government entities, such as the Ministry of Defense, especially the Department of Military Affairs. Then it was targeting the National Informatics Center, which is used to host all government-related domains and all the sensitive documents at the same time. Moving on to the cluster 4, which is a little bit different. So here we saw in the first quarter of 2024, 3 different campaigns. So this was not targeting Linux-based systems. It was only focusing on Windows-based systems. And if you see the infection chain, it is using the typical archive file containing a shortcut file with a double extension format. And once you click it, it will trigger the remote HTA file. So this initial HTA file is behaving as like a first stager, and then it was downloading the subsequent HTA-based stages. So dual HTA stages were being run in the memory of MSHTA, and it was dropping both Alacore RATs at the same time. So both are almost same. There are a little bit difference where the C2 commands are different, and both of them are actually communicating with each other, and then it is finally connecting to the C2 address. So keep in mind the specific C2 commands like ping, pong, upload file, download file, because these will later be used in correlation based on commands as well. And as I said, this was observed in the first quarter of 2024, and we saw 3 specific campaigns or spikes in our telemetry during the end of March and then the 1st of April. So this was the time when the actual financial income tax return filings will happening and what are the allowances allocated. So based on that, we have observed different lures. And if you come back to the dual allocore RAT, here, as I said, this is an open source remote access Trojan with a different, file operations that you can modify with these both dual variants. And here you can see the first and the second allocore RAT. I mean, the dual versions are communicating with each other, and along with the C2 as well, like they are ping-ponging each other to, maintain the connection and stay alive, that is the victim is present or not. So as I said, these are the lures related to the grant of allowances. So during the financial year, at the end of that, there were lures related to allowances to various military officers, like hardship allowance. We have seen risk allowance and transport allowance. So let's move on to APT 36, a little bit overview of that. So it is also known as Transparent Drive, which is the parent APT group of SideCopy. And recently we have observed it also started to target Linux and Windows-based systems. But the Crimson Rat payloads were almost seen since 2013, and they were having detections more than 50 on VT. But now we have observed that a lot of new Crimson Rat variants, which are completely packed, are having very low VT detection rates. So they were using various packers like .NET Reactor, Confuser X, Crypto Obfuscator, East-Fuscator, and many more. So the typical infection chain of APT36 is, it again drops the spear phishing email with the VBA macros, be it Excel files, be it Word documents or any PowerPoint documents. So these are embedded with various OLE objects. And here we saw that the two Crimson Rats were actually decoded and then finally dropped onto the payload and connecting to the C2 address. So this is the typical APT36 infection chain. And this is the VBA macro where you can see that it was extracting whatever OLE objects or embedded binaries are present, and then apply the base64 decoding, which was not seen previously. So once the base64 decoding is done, it drops the final payloads, and then it actually deletes whatever the VBA macro is present for that initial spear phishing document, so that it immediately evades detections. So these are the various Crimson Rat variants that we have observed over the years, and almost all of them are having a similarity of a minimum of 75%. I mean, the only difference that we have observed is that the C2 commands are being changed, especially the numbers. So the commands itself are completely the same, but it is introducing a unique character or a different number in each of its variants. That is the only typical information or the difference that we have initially found. It was using the 22 commands for C2 communication, but later we have also observed it was having variants related to C2 commands where we almost observed 48 C2 commands were used for the C2 communication. But typically it's almost 22 C2 commands that we have observed. And even APT36 is using lures related to significant ongoing events like the filing of income tax return, which will start during the July of 2024. And in October last year we had our Indian general elections where themes related to that were actually used to target not only government officials but even some journalists as well. And here we observed our second correlation. So all these Crimson Rat payloads were connecting to a C2 as mentioned here, and this was resolving to 4 different IPs when we observed with its DNS history. And among one of this ASN or the IP address, we have observed an allocore rat which was based on .NET. So previously we have seen SideCopy is using the allocore rat which is based on Delphi. And if you remember the commands which were used, it was like ping, pong, upload file, download file. So here you can see the same set of commands for the C2 communication, but this is a .NET based payload. And we also found a bonus keylogger, which is again we named it as allocore keylogger. So this is our second correlation which we found with APT36 and SideCopy APT. Moving on to the fifth cluster is our most interesting find, we could say. So going to how we hunted this, so in 2023, at the end of the year, we observed new TTPs of an APT that we named as RusticWeb. It was again targeting the Indian government entities, but this was using various new TTPs, like it was using Rust-based payloads, which was never seen targeting this specific set of victims. It was using various web services like Oshi Upload, Firebase, to exfiltrate all these sensitive documents. So later we saw that though the TTPs are completely different, the decoys that were used in this specific campaign were later also referred by various other researchers like Volexity, BlackBerry, and Eclectic IQ, where they have observed new payloads, that is the Discomoji, which was using emojis to communicate as a C2 commands, where it was using Discord webhooks for the communication. So though the same decoys were used, we were interested in to find the same Discomoji payloads. Is it actually related to APT36? Because these blogs, they did not mention this RusticWeb was affiliated to APT36. So we went on to hunt this specific Discomoji payloads, and then we found 3 specific open directories. And if you see the naming or the actual domains, review assignment, campus portals, education portals, all these are related to various education portals which were created long back, since many years, a decade ago, and these were actually compromised. And in May, July, and August, we have seen primarily SideCopy payloads being hosted. But since we were actually hunting for Discomoji payloads, in the second open directory, that is the campus portals, we observed that on the left-hand side, you can see the open directory is hosting the Discomoji, which is attributed to APT36. But on the right-hand side, you can see it was also hosting the HTA-based stages, which were affiliated to SideCopy, and these were actually hidden URLs, because it is not hosted on the open directory. So this is, you can see, our next correlation for both of these APT groups. And this is the complete infection chain that we have observed, where on the left-hand side, you can see SideCopy TTPs, which is targeting Windows-based payloads. And on the right-hand side, you can see the Discomoji, which is attributed to APT36. So Discomoji, here we observed that previously Volexity has observed that it was using another compromised domain to host this Discomoji. But in this infection, we have observed it using Google Drive to host all these payloads. And then, the initial infection started with the Golang downloader, finally downloading the Discomoji payload and communicating with the C2 Discord server. And if you see, it is also using oshi.at and transfer.sh, web service, agents or tools, which we also saw with, other similar SideCopy APT, where oshi upload Firebase was used to exfiltrate documents. And coming to the Windows-based SideCopy payloads, here we saw the typical HTA-based stager. Here it was dropping 3 different remote access Trojans, that is its usual action rat and the new reverse rat payload. We observed a new Jetta rat payload, which is almost having the same functionality of async rat. And all these rats were connecting to the same C2, and this C2 is having a common name, as mentioned here, with the Windows variant. And this specific common name was observed since 2013 with APT36 infrastructure. So this is our next correlation that we have observed. And since these both infection chains are actually targeting the same entities, what we observed is that it was not targeting the usual government entities, but it was targeting using lures related to various research assignments and so on. So same decoy documents were observed in both these infection chains. And then as these APTs are affiliated or attributed to Pakistan. So here we found more evidence where we observed these HTA stages being tested at geolocations based in Pakistan, and it was directly testing all these HTA based stages. So we found out that it was not usually hosted on this a public directory where it targets the victims. It was being tested on the desktop, actual desktop folders. Then we have observed exfiltration messages on this specific Discomoji payload using the Pakistan's most popular language. And then we have also seen that victim traffic was actually being redirected, not directly between India and then Pakistan. It was redirected through Germany through IPsec, and thanks to Thibault for mentioning this. And we also seen other links like misleading, error handling messages where different themes related to Kavach, which is an application used by various government entities. So based on that, we again confirmed that it is actually attributed to these specific geolocations. So these are the HTA stages, and what we observed is that all these are fully undetected or FUD. I mean, the static detections are 0 on VT, and it was using various custom alphabet decoding, various decryptions like XOR-based decryption, string manipulation techniques like string reversal based on how many strings it should reverse, like 1 string, 2 string, 5 strings. It was using Caesar cipher shift, and it was using, its typical embedding of DLL, and then we also observed it using scripts and various codes like WMI-based scripting and VB scripts, and then finally, invoking the DLL payload embedded dynamically in the memory of MSHTA. The unique thing that we observed is that there was a specific domain which is mimicking the Pakistan ministry. But as we earlier saw, SideCopy is again copying the TTPs of Sidewinder APT. And here we saw that SideCopy is even using the same domain. I mean, though it is embedded in the comment section, it is not even modifying all these previous targetings of Sidewinder APT. So it is just blindly changing whatever targets it wants, the DLL payload, and that's it. These are the HTA-based rats which we observed. So initially we saw all the rats are dropped used via DLL sideloading techniques, or the actual payload is dropped in the public directory. But here we have seen that the rats are being actually loaded in the process of MSHTA, and here 3 different HTA stages were observed. So what this does is once the remote HTA is triggered, it will check like what operating system is being run, what Windows version like 7, 10 or 11 is being run, and based on that, that specific HTA stager is triggered. And then the final JetaRat that we have observed is loaded. Here we saw that the JetaRat is almost having the same functionality, especially related to the browser stealing code, where same functionality related to exfiltrating all the cookies and browser-related profiles were seen, similar to that of async rat. So it is again copying not only TTPs of Sidewinder APT, but using open source agents and just using basic custom tooling. And here, as I said, these are the decoys that we have observed. So it has shifted targeting, the typical government and military entities to university students. Initially, we thought that it was targeting the various education entities or the universities. But depending upon the lures that we have observed and our telemetry analysis, so you can see it was using various assignment-related lures like research work, Indian emerging as leading global economy, some survey forms, some questionnaires, and even what are the students require for the specific professional writing skills. And then we confirmed that it was actually targeting the university students to get the information and background of these specific students. So now we saw that SideCopy started targeting these university students since last year. But APT36 was also seen to target university students since 2022. So in starting of 2022 or at the mid of 2022, we observed the first spike where it has started targeting these students. And in 2023 and slowly even in 2024 July, we have recently observed it was targeting university students. The University of Delhi-based lure was used here. So these are all the correlations that we have observed between APT36, SideCopy, and RusticWeb, where you can see that the infrastructure and services like the C2 address, the exfiltration services like Oshi.at, even Firebase. It was also using FileZilla, for the FTP-based exfiltration of documents, the C2 commands, and the common name that we have observed, and the domains where multiple payloads between these were shared, having been correlated. And coming to the lure files as observed by other vendors, the same lure files were being shared between these APT groups, the decoy files were being shared, and even at the stage of the payloads, specifically where we observed the Linux-based stager using the Golang. So that was being shared between SideCopy and APT36. And on Windows front, we have seen the custom alloco rat where both .NET was used by APT36 and SideCopy was using the Delphi variant of the same alloco rat. So these are all the sweet correlations that we have identified. Again, confirming the relation or the attribution between these both APTs. So far we have observed in all these previous clusters, the HTA-based stages were being continuously used. Even though they are like fully undetected statically at that time, it was trying to shift its TTPs, and last year was when we first observed the MSI-based first cluster, where initially we started with hunting more open directories like we have seen in the cluster 5. And then we observed various open directories where it was hosting new payloads. So it was using a DOTM-based initial infection vector, where it was dropping the various payloads. It was using BAT-based stages, and then we saw it using MSI-based stages. But it has also started to move to a different victimology or the targeting. Here we saw that it was trying to target the maritime sector, especially entities related to various docks, shipyards, and ports. So on the top, you can see in the infection chain, it was using the archive file, which is themed as salary increment FY 2024 using the LNK-based trigger, and then it was downloading the MSI-based stager. This MSI-based stager is again, as you know, MSI-based stager, can pack lot of things. The decoy, the rat were completely packaged in this MSI, and then finally the decoy was triggered, which was targeting the Ministry of Defense, especially the Indian Air Force. And this reverse rat we have also observed with this specific open directory that we have observed. So it was using DOTM-based files to trigger this same reverse rat payload. And initially, after some time, we have observed the reverse rat, downloading additional payloads such as cheeks or USB copier. And if you see all the C2 domains and the fake lure documents that were being used, so we can see that it was, related to various ports, and all these entities are coming under the Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Dockyards, again related to the Indian government entities. So these are the specific lures that we have observed. So the first one is the port entry permit lure that it was used, the pay and allowances, which was targeting specifically the Indian Air Force officers under the Ministry of Defense. And on the right-hand side, you can see various, contracts related to, the Cochin Shipyard Limited documents and various invoices related to that. And the right side that we have observed, these decoys were actually, present on the open directory on these specific portals, and it was, easily accessible to any one of us. And then we observed more and more of .NET-based payloads. Like we have seen, it was using cheeks to download further and exfiltrate all kinds of sensitive documents. We have seen USB copier payloads where it was trying to search what USB or hardware devices are actually connected, and then enumerate all these devices and exfiltrate this specific information, again all the sensitive documents even from the USB devices. Then we have observed our second MSI cluster at the end of 2024, or you can say specifically after the Christmas during the New Year, where we have observed new domains which were mimicking the governance portals of various ministries. It has actually compromised the official government domain related to the National Hydrology Project. And the open directory that we have observed is hosting, again, completely new payloads. The same MSI-based stager was used, but again, the TTPs where we observed was completely different. So starting with the spear phishing email link, it was downloading here the archive file. So the archive file was not attached, but here the link was provided in the specific spear phishing email. And then we observed again the same targeting, like Windows and Linux-based platforms were targeted using the same naming convention. And the right-hand side, if you see, it was targeting the Linux-based systems, where the same Golang-based stager was used, where we observed it with APT36 and SideCopy. But here we saw that it is dropping not the Aris rat, but the Spark rat, again, which is an open source rat, which was, I think, active since 2022, which is open source on GitHub. And on the left-hand side, you can see the typical, the MSI-based cluster where we have seen it was dropping new TTPs, where it was using new DLL side loading techniques. And finally, it was loading a completely new rat, which we have named as curlback rat. And this was, side-loaded using the typical GIRP exe, which we again, related to Microsoft. And then the C2, which we have observed, are completely different, which is registering all the victims with, the attacker's C2. These are the decoys, and if you observe, all these decoys are completely different. They were not targeting government entities or university students. The first decoy, if you see, it is related to cybersecurity guidelines. But if you see the logo, it was actually related to an company related to oil and gas sector. And the second decoy document is related to targeting of the railway entities. Again, all these entities come under the Indian government, where we have observed a lot of different entities under this specific, for example, the Southern Railway entity was observed to be targeted here. And then the right-hand side, you can see the specific decoy where it was targeting the Ministry of External Affairs. So here we saw it was targeting not the maritime sector, as we have observed in the first MSI cluster. So it is now targeting different entities under railways, oil and gas, and even the Ministry of External Affairs. And on this specific e-governance domain, which is like the open directory that we have observed, there were a lot of subdomains that were being hosted, and these were actually hosting various credential phishing login portals so that it can harvest credentials not only of these government entities but even to various services. So services such as webmail, payroll system, and all the management systems that were actually observed by the specific used by these government entities or even citizens of that specific state were observed. And all these domains were related to a specific state in India known as Maharashtra, and all the municipal corporations under this were being mimicked with the specific domains. So we have observed almost 13 such subdomains under this e-governance portal, and this is the complete DNS history. So it was firstly created way back in June 2023, and now if you see that the latest one in 2024 December was being created under the same as a subdomain. Though it is being rotated with a different ASN, it was all of these ASNs are located in India, again confirming that the target and the infrastructure is completely related to SideCopy APT. So moving on to the technical analysis. So this is the second MSI cluster where we have observed the LNK file, triggering the MSI based payloads. So if you see, the command is having a lot of escape sequences like the exponent that we have observed to make analysis difficult. But eventually what it is doing is it is using the MSI exec the Windows inbuilt binary to execute or install the specific binaries hosted remotely. And here you see that it has also compromised the official domain. So previously we have seen that it was creating a lot of fake domains, but now official government entity or domains were also being compromised. And then this MSI based stager has a .NET payload, which eventually drops the PDF, all the final DLL rats and the payloads that are used to infiltrate the system. This is the curlback rat that we have seen, which is actually a signed binary. And when we went into the reverse analysis, we saw that it was using a lot of curl-based binaries, for communication and downloading all the subsequent payloads. And the compilation timestamp we have observed is exactly during, after the Christmas, or you can say during the New Year, during the last week of December. And then we have seen that it was initially starting to maintain connectivity check with the /antivm command, where it first see that you can see on the C2 especially this specific URL where you can see the antivm status is on or off. So based on this, the further communication will be done, and then it gathers the typical system information like enumerates what all processes are present, enumerates the complete system information like the hardware settings, the memory usage, external devices connected, and it even enumerates how many displays are connected, and then finally uploads all this to the attacker machine. And after that, it tries to establish persistence via scheduled task named as OneDrive, and then it finally registers the actual victim by creating a UUID and then registering it with the attacker machine. So these are the 4 initial commands. These are not the C2 commands that we observed, but all these C2 commands, are in a reverse the string format, and its functionalities are related to registering the victim, fetching the C2 commands from the actual attacker machine, and then making sure that the connection is alive between the victim and the attacker, and finally uploading the initial results that we have seen to the attacker machine. So these are the next C2 commands, the actual C2 commands, which were fetched from the C2. So once the victim is registered, so using that same ID, the commands are fetched from this specific C2, where it will establish persistence, download, extract, and check what kind of privileges are present, like system level privileges are being run with the current payload, or is it having admin or the standard user privileges. So far we have seen the Windows-based payloads, and now moving on to the SparkRat. I mean, SparkRat, I know most of you might have heard about this. It is, open source, which was, having more than 500 folks since 2022. And this was, dropped via the same Linux-based stager, which was seen with, the previous cron tab persistence, and then finally dropping the payloads. So it was using the simple get command to download this SparkRat payload. And we have seen almost, lot of variants like Thunder version, and then various custom variants that were used by Chinese-based APTs like DragonSpark, Tag100. This is the last final cluster that we have seen, where we saw it was going back to HCA, targeting the defense sector, but no DLL-based sideloading was observed here. It was using new payloads, like AES encryption via PowerShell, and then finally dropping another open source RAT, that is XenoRAT. So this is the spear phishing email that we have observed on 15th Jan 2025 and 13th Jan, and decoy email was being used to target specific entities. So still the HTA is almost FUD on VT, but if you see the new TTPs, it was trying to exfiltrate and extract the final payload from the resources section, and then using PowerShell to actually decrypt this AES encrypted payload, and finally the custom XenoRAT is being dropped. So this is again an open source RAT which emerged in around 2023, and even we saw that it is having custom variants which even Talos has been observed, which it attributed to North Korean APTs, and it is using the typical features like HVNC, microphone access, and SOX5 proxies. So these are
Satwik, we need to conclude.
Almost done.
We need to finish.
So this is the threat hunting, static-based threat hunting methodologies and infrastructure hunting that we have seen, like how to hunt open directories. These are all the staging domains that we have observed since 2023 and even in 2025. So it is being, using the same ASN. So this is the final timeline of SideCopy APT, where you can see the new TTPs, how it was targeting specific entities, and all the decoys related to the ongoing events. And I might have skipped some of them, but you can look at all our publications where detailed research and analysis has been published. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.